All right, today I want to go over the rigging stuff for our robot so you can see how to rig them. The faster we get done with the rigging stuff, then we can get on to the animation stuff, which is, in some cases, some people enjoy animation more than rigging, so there you go. The purpose of rigging is to make our job of animating a lot easier. So, for instance, if I were to open up this here, so this was, Jasmine had Sonic as her bouncing ball, and as the ball rolled, obviously the spikes need to go into the ground or hide somehow. If it doesn't, let me just duplicate this so we can see. Whoops. There we go. If it doesn't, then it would just look like that, right? And that would look kind of weird. So if I rig this a certain way, then I can get this to automatically go into the ground every time it rolls over. Okay? So that's part of what we're doing there. I had another one I was going to show. Toppler. Same kind of thing here. Let's say that I wanted this type of animation to happen. Woo. Right? So it's a lot easier to rig something like this than to go forward and try to animate it by hand, okay? For each one of these instances, there's different things that are being used to control this type of scenario. So in this case, just so you can see it, I think the whole thing is done by expressions. Yes. So I have expressions that are written on here, and that's fancy stuff. That's what's making it work, okay? This is the thing toppling it, like rotating back and forth. This is the thing spinning around, and then this is the sphere spinning around. Okay? You do. That's fine. Yes. So, same thing for our robot guy here. So, if we were to grab, let's say, his head joint and we rotated it, obviously that's one way to do it, but it's very unintuitive. It would be much nicer if we were just grabbing a controller and moving the controller around. It's a lot simpler. When I go to the hand here, instead of me trying to dig around for the right pieces of geometry, if I was able just to click on something and make the finger bend, that would be optimal, okay? Especially because I'm moving multiple joints at a time. 1, 2, 3 joints in each one of those fingers. Same thing with the thumb. And then that. Okay, even moving the arm, it's much simpler if I'm able just to grab the arm and move it like this than trying to grab all the right pieces of geometry and rotate it, moving pivots around, all that kind of stuff. So before you get to this point where it's rigged like this, obviously you have to make that bone structure inside there. Make sure all of your rotates are rotating the correct way. And what I mean by that, let me jump back to one of my earlier versions. That one maybe. And hide my geometry. You'll find the show menu is excellent for hiding your geometry, or you can put it on a layer. When I grab this and go to the rotate tool, that's obviously like wonky. It should not be rotating from this weird angle. I should be able to rotate just perfectly horizontal and perfectly vertical. Okay, this going to the side or going to this side or going at this crazy angle doesn't work. And the same thing for this, I should be able to take the head and rotate it perfectly down, not off to one side and off to the other. So anytime I have this type of scenario after I've created the joints, I can use that thing under rigging where I would go to orient joint and make sure it's set to orient to world. And that should have worked, but it didn't work. Why didn't you work? It doesn't like me. Not a big deal. There's always a workaround. So I'm going to hit Shift-P on that joint that unparents it. I'm going to make sure that nothing else is parented to it. Yep, see the head's parented to it, so that's probably what it didn't like. So I unparented the head. Now I can grab this, then do that orient joint. Works perfectly, and now I can just reparent everything back together. Parent that, turn the head back on, grab the head, shift-click the joint, and parent it. So now when I grab that joint and rotate it, you'll see how the head is able to rotate perfectly straight down or perfectly side to side. When I do this one, I'm going to have to do probably the same thing. I'm going to have to unparent all the joints. So he has to be by himself, basically. Oops, and you. And then I have to unparent that piece of geometry, so this thing, Shift P there. And then I can grab this, do the orient. Oh, yep, there it is. There's his neck thing. There you go. All right. Now try this again. Skeleton, orient, perfect. While I'm at it, let me just double check and make sure everything else is working good. Yes, yes, yes. Cool. Okay, so that would be a step that you would take to get everything lined up correctly. Put everything back together. The children joints, which are these outer ones, just get parented to that. And if you look at how the arrows are going, that's going to show how the flow of this moves. So all of these should be pointing away from that because this is the center. And then I go back to my polygons. I make sure I click the right stuffs. Parent that in there. Sweet. So now he should be all set and ready to go.
Did you parent the neck as well?
I did. I grabbed that with it. You can double check by just grabbing that pelvis and moving it. Everything should move with it. If it doesn't, I hit undo and move it back. You don't want to move anything away from this origin. Everything should stay, like the robot should stay there because it'll make your life a lot easier when you start duplicating stuff and moving things around. I showed before how if you draw some stuff in Illustrator, some curves, you could save that as an Illustrator 8 file, bring that into Maya. So I'm going to go to Create Illustrator Object. Make sure this is set to curves, and go find my curves that I have. I put it in Source Images, I put it in Curves for Robot, and there they are. Okay? So some of these I'm not going to need. So I have ones for the right and left knee. He doesn't have any right and left knee controllers, so I'm just going to delete those. I drew those, I don't need them. This is for his elbow, right elbow, left elbow. This is for the robot himself. That's just an extra letter, I can just delete that. This is for his foot, this is for his hand. Okay. So you don't need to use these. You can use Create NURBS circles. You can use circles all over the place. It's not very intuitive, but it works, okay? Especially if you were to move one item and to the left and one item on top of it, you don't know what's controlling what. If his right and left elbow are right near each other, it's pretty obvious which is which, right? If I had two circles there, you would know what's controlling the left elbow and what's controlling the right elbow. All right, so the first thing I do before I do any actual rigging is I need to make sure that all of these things that are going to be used as my controllers are all connected correctly, okay? And they may change, but for the most part, they're going to be connected correctly. So I'm going to take this thing, I'm going to grab all of them actually, because I need to do the same thing to all of them. I need to center their pivots. I'm going to unparent them, and now they're all by themselves. So this one is his foot, so I'm just going to move this to where I'm going to be manipulating this from. So I'm going to turn off my polygons, and I know that for his foot, I'm going to move it right to that joint, okay? Because that curve is going to be used to just rotate that joint up and down. That's all it's going to be used for. I'm going to flatten it out, so I'll rotate it to 90 degrees. I'm going to duplicate it, scoot that over. All right, so I have one for each foot there. I need one for each hip, so I'm going to duplicate this and scoot it up. Just so they're obviously different, I'm just going to make this bigger. Okay. I'm also going to double check when I turn my geometry back on that I can see them. Right now they're too small, they're nestled inside that. So I just make it bigger so I can see it. And then I'll make these a tad bit bigger as well. Okay. Now, it's important that these are centered right in the middle of that joint, because as I rotate this, it's going to rotate the joint. If this is way over here, as I rotate it way over there, that joint may go crazy off of its center, okay? So, perfectly centered. This is for his hand, so that's going to go to his wrist. Oops. I'm going to hold down V and just drag it over to his wrist, make it bigger, and then I want the fingers pointing up. Same thing on the other side. Duplicate, snap it over to that side. Here's his right elbow. Remember, everything is based off of his right and his left, not my right and my left. That changes based on how my camera is spun around. So right elbow will snap to his right elbow. Left elbow will snap to his left elbow. We won't have these actually like right behind him like this. They'll actually be pushed back a little bit, okay? And you'll see why when we get to that point. I need a controller for his hip so that I can grab basically the whole robot and move him over if I need to. I also need one for the head so he can rotate his head around, okay? I didn't make any controls for that. I can use, just like I said, one of these circles. I probably won't confuse that with anything else. The hip and the head will never be near each other. Again, make sure it's big enough to see. I'm just going to duplicate it, snap it to the neck area, make this a bit smaller, and then just double check the sizing. Yes, everything looks good placed. Okay. Then I'm going to rotate this down. That's too big. That's too big. I'm going to go to my front view, turn my grid on. And this doesn't really matter as far as like where it is. This is mainly just like a big controller. Typically, if I have extra options I may want to include, I would drop them on there. So some rigs you might see, they would have like the Andy rig that I'll show. You can actually change what Andy's wearing. You can also change Andy's hairstyle, whether Andy's a boy or girl, the smoothness levels. There's a whole bunch of different options you can set. So those kinds of things are for typically like that kind of stuff. So we'll leave it there. Maybe I want to put an antenna on the robot later. I can turn it on and off. Maybe I want the robot to have a different head. I can substitute different heads in there too, okay? Cool. So now everything is placed where it needs to be. I just need to then parent it to what they should be controlled by, okay? And this is where people will get mixed up. So this hand is going to control, obviously the hand, the hand here. It's also going to control the elbow, and it's also going to control the shoulder. So I can't parent it to anything it's going to control, because as I move that controller, let's say left, if it's parented to the shoulder and it moves the shoulder left, well now it's going to move the hand left and move the shoulder left and move the hand left and shoulder left and so on, okay? So we always take it to the next joint above it. In my demo, I didn't create this collarbone one. You don't need it, I just like to have it. So I'm going to parent it to the collarbone, or I could parent it to that. Either one is acceptable. So I shift click that and I parent it. I'll do the same thing on this side. The elbow, same situation. The elbow is going to control the elbow, which in turn controls the shoulder, so that will also be parented to that thing. This will be the waist will be parented to this, so that will actually go backwards, but I'm not going to do that yet, okay? This is going to be parented to the waist. This is going to be parented to the waist. This will be parented to the knee. And then this will be parented to the knee. Okay? So this here is going to control the foot. The foot and the leg are totally independent. But what I want to happen is, as the leg moves up, that controller moves with it. Okay? If it's not parented to the leg, that controller will stay back as the leg moves up. And that's not very intuitive. Okay, and then this will be parented to that middle thing. Most of the stuff you can see kind of goes to that middle area because that's a very simple rig. What do I have here? A curve, that's fine there. And a circle, that's fine there. Okay. So now that everything is kind of in place where it needs to be, it's parented to what it needs to be parented to, I have to go through and reset all of these so that they start off at 0. If I grab the hands here, you can see all this mess that's inside the channel box. That's way too much stuff, especially if we decided we wanted to rotate the hand. It's much easier to have a 0 spot we can go back to, okay? So I'm going to turn off my joint selection. That way I can marquee all the curves at once. and then I can go to modify and then freeze my transforms. Okay. I'm going to do another check on these just to make sure everything is still rotating correctly. Yes, 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 yes. Sometimes when you parent stuff, you freeze the transforms, like this one. And it happened on the demo one that I had up. I don't know why this one is fine, but that one is not fine. Okay? There's no reason for it. So this one I will fix later. I'll show it once I get to it. But I'm just going to leave it like that for now. Okay, there's no reason that I can think of why it would not rotate correctly or be set up correctly. Even if I went to that orient, this isn't a joint, so number one, it wouldn't work. I can't freeze the transform on it because that doesn't work. It's just stupid. Yours may not do that. Every time you do rigging, it's different, okay? So that's cool. Everything's good. So now I'm going to turn my joints back on. I'm going to grab the joint. I'm going to shift-click this curve, and then I will parent it to that. So now I have this main curve. If I grab it and move it, everything goes with it. If I need to reset it, I put it back to 0 and everything goes back to 0, okay? And another reason we froze transforms, if we screw up and move something, we just reset it to 0 and it goes back to where it started, okay? Cool. So I'll double check, make sure everything moves. Yes, everything moves, okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up, let me save this as, there you go. I'm going to set up the leg controllers. Those are pretty simple to do. So I'm going to start here. I need to be able to rotate this and have this joint that's underneath it also rotate. Okay, very straightforward. I don't want to take this and be able to rotate it this way, because that would break it, obviously. And I don't want to be able to rotate it that way, because that would break it. So I just want this one direction. When I rotate this in the Y direction, you can see it's moving. Then this joint here would also rotate. Now we have to pay attention to what is controlling what. Like, what are the two attributes? Oops. Undo. Zoom back in. All right, so I rotate this. Which direction is this rotating? Because I want to know. Another one. All right. Now what about this one? Z. Right? Because of how the joints are oriented, they typically will never fall perfectly in line. So Y is rotating for the curve, but for the joint, it's Z. So I have to create a relationship between these two things. If it was an exact thing, I'll show you what I can do later, but it's not exact. I have to go in there and basically connect this attribute to that attribute. Now let's also look to see if it's positive or negative, because that will again control how we do this. So if I rotate this down, this is negative, right? Let's go to the other one. If I rotate this down, negative. Okay, so we have a direct relationship. The Y is going to the Z, exactly the same. So I'm going to go to this here. I'm going to go to General Editors, and I'm going to go to Connection Editor. There it is. Too many C's in there. This may look confusing, but it's pretty straightforward. The left side is the output. The right side is the input. Yes, that's right. So stuff is going out of here and then going into something. So basically I want to take the translate Y and send it out to the other one. Okay? So I'm going to grab the joint, make sure I've clicked the joint, and reload the right. And you can see the from to. So if I switch this, that will change what is the output and what is the input. So I'm going to go here. This is my curve, which I should name. I name that after. And I'm going to say the rotate, there it is. What do we say? Rotate Y will control rotate Z. Okay, so now we've just created a connection so that anytime we change the rotate Y of that curve, it will also change the rotate Z of that joint. So we'll test it out. Set this aside. I'll grab this, and it works. And then as I'm checking this, I'm verifying it's not offset. If it's offset, as I rotate, the joint isn't like, way over here and the foot's like coming off of where it needs to be attached to. Everything looks good. Cool, so that worked. So now let's try the other one. Let's label this right foot control. And this one is going to be left foot control. All right, so this one, let's check this out. Oh, there's the problem one, right? So if I rotate this, this is still the Y direction, but obviously it's going in this like funky like side, and that doesn't make sense. So instead of parenting this to that joint, I'm going to shift click the piece of geometry and parent it to that. Now, in my case, it was off. Your case, you may draw it, it may not be off, okay? So you have to use your judgment as to, is it working or not? The second I did that, notice over here, the translates, the rotates, all have stuff on there now, okay? So I need to freeze the transform on that curve again. Now it's perfect, okay? So now which direction is this going? And then which direction is this going? Okay, now let's look at the positive and negative. Yep, and Z is negative, right? So now we have something where it's completely different. Typically it's not like that. Typically it'll be pretty even. There are ways to fix it. For now, we'll just move forward with it, okay? So this can't work. This connection editor won't work because as I control this, as the X goes into the positive, the other one's going to go negative and vice versa, right? So it'll actually go opposite. So I'm going to do something different. I don't like to have things set up differently as far as the left foot is using the connection editor and the right foot is using something else. So I'm actually going to click on the joint and I'm going to break the connection here. Where is my break connection? Oh, there we go. Break connection. I'm going to set them up the same way. That just makes it easier. If I need to tweak something, I know exactly how each foot is set up. So I'm going to use animation editors and expression editor. Okay, I'll show a couple ways, but this is one way. So the exact same thing that we did, this item and attribute equals this item and attribute. That's what we set up in the connection editor. That's all we're going to type here. Okay. So I just need to make sure that my stuff is labeled correctly. So this is left ankle, and this curve is left foot control. So I'm going to say, make this bigger so you can see it, and make sure I called my stuff the correct thing. Yes, I did. Okay. That's why consistency helps. Left ankle rotate Z equals left foot control dot rotate Y. And see if that's correct. That is not correct. I think that's a lowercase f. It was. Okay. So now here's what this does. So we have the item, which is this joint. Dot just separates the item and the attribute. So dot rotate Z equals the left foot control dot rotate Y. That's exactly what it says. There's no, it's straightforward, okay? Make sure the name's correct. If you're not sure, you can click on it, you can copy it, especially if you're someone who's prone to typos, and you can just paste it in there. I click on the curve, I copy it, oops, it's all gone, okay? By default, it's set to this by object attribute name. If you just set it to expression name, then it'll keep everything in there, okay? Notice how before I typed in RY and RZ, all lowercase. When I hit edit or create, it automatically updates. Lowercase RY and lowercase RZ just stands for rotate Y and rotate Z. You could also type it out, rotate capital Z, rotate capital Y. So now if I scoot this over and I check it out, it works exactly the same way, okay? Now here's where expressions kind of outrank using the connection editor. I'm going to put a semicolon at the end of this. I'm going to copy this and paste it. Okay, so I know that this is now the right ankle and the right foot. If this was an exact connection, like the same Z and Y were still there, I could just hit edit and everything would be fine. It would just work perfectly, okay? Obviously it isn't. This is still rotate Z, but this was X. And this was actually negative X. So I hit edit. So now let's test it out. No, because this one, when it went positive, the other one was going negative. Okay, so as this one goes positive, that joint is actually rotating negative. So that's why I had to put that negative there. And for us, negative just means opposite. So when one goes positive, the other one goes negative, so it's just opposite. If this one went negative and the other one went positive, we would still put that negative sign in there, okay? So it's very straightforward. You may have to sit there and think about it for a second before you're like, okay, what am I trying to do? Even if it means like writing down like, this one's going to control that one, whatever helps, okay? You're not going to learn any expressions if you just type exactly what I type, hit create, and then it doesn't work and you just give up, okay? Go through it and see, did I type it all correctly? Is the casing exactly as I have it? 90% of the time, when I get called over because your expression isn't working, it's a typo, okay? Just the same thing with coding. This is my preferred method because it's this easy, okay? It's that easy to do. And let's say that I wanted to modify this in some way. Like let's say that as I rotated this down, I wanted to rotate, let's say, twice as fast. So if I want something to move twice as fast, what should I do? Like that? Multiplied, right? So if I multiply it times 2, and it doesn't matter which side. Oops. It does matter if the 2 and the multiplier. There we go. So now as I rotate this, you'll see it rotates twice as fast. Okay? Doesn't really work in this case. It's like odd because it's not keeping up with it, but definitely we could do that. Let's get rid of that. Okay? All of your expressions for your entire scene can be stored in one area. Okay? Now here's how we would do that if we wanted to do it another way. I'm going to open up my WordPad. I'm going to paste that expression because I just hit the delete key, so the expression's gone. It no longer works. Okay. Window, node editor, we'll try that. So I'm going to go to one of these tabs, which is create. Where's that create at? There it is. Create. Oh, not create tab. Close name options. There it is. Create node. I have to right click. I don't use the node editor too often, but you can definitely play with it. Well, let's skip that for now. We'll get to that in a second. Okay. So I'm going to load in the two things. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to shift click the joint. And then I'm going to click on this, which will load both of those items in here. Okay. So this is laying out each one of my items. So here is the thigh, here is the ankle, and here is the toe. The ankle is the one that I need to adjust. My foot control, not the foot control shape, but the foot control, is the one that's going to control it. So I'm going to open this up, and this shows me all that stuff. So if I open up rotate, here's all my rotates. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to open up these rotates. Okay, so this is the right foot. So we said that the X is going to control the Z. So it's just dragging. Pretty simple. Just this is going to connect to that. This is going to go backwards. Okay. So now I'm going to right click and go to my create node. And I'm going to add in a multiplier. So there's a multiply divide here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to route this rotate X into the multiply divide. Oops, I'll make this bigger so we can see it. Okay. So I'm going to take the X and put it into the X of 1. It has to convert it, so it adds this thing in there. That's no big deal. Okay, and then there's my ankle. And then I'm going to take the output, come on, of X and put that into the Z. And then it'll do another conversion. Okay, so now if I grab this multiply divide, it's basically going to take my value, multiply it. There's my value coming in, multiply it times this, and that's what it's going to send out. So just like I typed in a negative, I'm going to type in -1 here. And now if I were to click on this and rotate it, you'll see that that works. Okay? So that's another way that you may see something rigged, is they may go through that in order for it to work. And the reason that they would do this is because there may be some other kind of connections that they want to make, some other things that they want to pipe in there that's a lot easier visually versus typing it in. Some people just work this way. I think this is more complicated than just typing times -1 or times 2 or whatever. Okay? So I'm not going to delete anything inside here because that will break stuff. I am going to grab that joint, right-click on it, and say break connection. And then if I just go back to my expression editor, paste that expression anywhere down here and say create, it's back in there. Okay? So I don't have to worry about like reconnecting and typing things in. That expression is good as long as those items are in the scene. Cool. So now I grab this, I rotate, perfect, grab this, rotate, perfect. Okay? Now, I have this up here, same situation, right? If I rotate this, I want that to also rotate. So as long as I get the names correct, then I should be good. So this is LT_hip. This is RT_hip. Make sure I have the caps the same, yes, yes. And then I'll check. This says thigh, so I'm going to go here. So that's going in the Y direction and negative. This one is going in the X direction and positive. So let me go back to my expressions. Hip to Y equals, I think that was it. Nope, I typed something wrong. That's hip. Oops, I have it backwards. No, that was Y. Nope, I've still typed something wrong. Let me double check my things. No, it's still not. It should read something besides it. Oh. Yep, consistency, right? That's what I said. So LT_hip. Make sure I grab the joint. LT_thigh. There we go. Come on, not leg, thigh. There we go. So now it works. So as long as you've typed the names correct, you should get something. It may be the wrong movement. I may grab this and rotate it. Probably. Yep, and it's going in the wrong direction. But at least it's working. Make this -1. Oops, not -1. Times -1. This here is the same thing as that. Okay, just shorthand. Or longhand, I guess. So that works. And you'll see that this other curve is going with it, so that as he like rotates his foot back, then I could grab this one and rotate his foot up like that. So if he's walking or whatever, he could do that. Let's see, RT hip, RT thigh. So I'm just going to copy that line. I'm going to go to the next one and paste it, and just change these RT and RT. Hit edit. I'll just see where it's at. No harm in doing that. Hey, it worked. Okay. Something didn't work, then I would figure out what is the correct rotation for this one, what's the correct one for that one. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of the ones that would be controlled like that, but you'll get an idea. Something like this, where we just have a hinge joint basically, that's what you would do for a hinge joint. This item's controlling that item. All right, So now let's see what else we have here. We have our wrist. I want the wrist to be able to rotate all the way around, okay? There we go. So with this one, if I just grabbed the wrist itself here and rotated it, that should give me a pretty good indicator as to making sure that everything works correctly. This is rotate Z and negative. This is rotate Y positive. This is, oh, that's not right. Why are you doing that to me? All right, so then we'll do the same thing. I'll parent it to the piece of geometry instead of the joint. Oops. Not that piece of geometry, though. I need to parent it to this piece of geometry. There we go. And then I can freeze transform. Yep. And now I should be able to rotate it correctly. Good. All right. Cool. So I should be able to grab that joint and rotate it, and it should go in the correct direction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this, I'm going to shift click the joint, and I'm going to go to constrain and say orient. Basically what I want to happen is as one rotates, the other one's going to rotate. So that's what should happen. By default, this is not checked. Always check it. So now if I grab this and rotate, it rotates that, it rotates this, and it rotates that. Now all this is doing is making a direct connection to the X, Y, and Z rotation for all three of those. That's all it's doing. If something was off, let's say I rotated my hand to the left and the hand went down, well, now I got a special circumstance. I'll jump to the expression editor and I'll type it in to say X is going to control Z, Y is going to control X, and then whatever is going to control whatever. Okay? It helps to have note paper next to you. That way you can remember this one's going negative, this one's going positive. Okay? Same thing on this one. Make sure as you're doing this that you're grabbing, I'm going to parent this to the skin also, and freeze my transforms. There we go. Make sure you're grabbing the joint. If I were to grab the skin here, obviously this is going to look different. I have the skin selected or the geometry selected, not the joint. So I'm not selecting everything. If I click this and shift click that, everything highlights. If you're concerned about it, like I want to make sure I don't break it, you can turn off geometry selection here. That way I can't select the geometry. Okay? Then I'll go back to constrain, go back to orient, verify, yes, cool. And now I can rotate down, yes, over, and like that. Perfect. Okay. Now I need to be able to rotate the arm. I want to be able to move the arm so that he can put his arm wherever he wants to put his arm. I'm going to go to rigging. Yes, I'm in the rigging menu. I'm going to go to create IK handle under skeleton. And what this does is it's going to create a connection between the shoulder joint and the wrist. That way I can grab that joint and move it around, and it'll move all the joints up the chain. So I'm going to turn off my geometry just so you can see this happen. I'm going to click on the shoulder joint. Okay, I can marquee it, or I can just click on it. Okay, always the shoulder first, then the wrist. Okay, that creates this little connector, and I'm not going to keep my movement, but just so you can see what it does, if I move this, you'll see how it moves all the joints around it. So I don't have to actually like rotate this and then rotate that. I can just move it. Always undo it back to where it was before. Okay, and the reason for this, if we don't undo, look at where its default value is. It's like those values. Okay, we don't want to use those values ever. We always want, when we rig something, to be able to get back to that original pose. So if I screw up, I can zero everything out and he jumps back to where it is. So what we're going to do is we're never going to animate this thing. I'm going to take that IK handle, and I will call it LT IK handle. And I'm going to shift click the hand and then parent it to the hand. So now I don't touch the IK handle at all. I grab the fingers and I can move that around, and if I screw up, I reset it to 0 and it goes back to where it was. Okay? If it helps to, as you're rigging stuff, to do one side then jump to the other, then do that. Grab that, Shift-click the fingers, parent it. And then I'll check it out. Yep, everything works. Cool. Now I need to control the elbow. So let's say, oops, in this case, the hand comes down like this, but I want his elbow to maybe be out more or in more or whatever. I don't have any control of that at the moment. So I'm going to grab the LE, which is the left elbow. I'm going to click on that IK handle. And under constrained, there's one called pull vector right there. So that one locks it so that the elbow will always face this now. Okay? So again, maybe my character has his hand on something, and the elbow is what's moving, not the hand itself. Now I have a control for that. Do the same thing here. I grab the RE first. I marquee to grab the IK handle, and I constrain pull vector. Now I grab this and move it. Grab that and move it. Yep, everything's working. Reset this back to 0. Reset that back to 0. Cool. All right, now let's go through the fingers. So we could have, and some rigs do, a controller for each one of the knuckles so that you could rotate each knuckle individually. That's something that some rigs have. For this, we don't want that. It's too much work. So what we want to create is just a way for us to have our own slider so that we can curl the fingers in. That's what we want to do. So I'm going to go to name this first. So this is left hand. And I'm going to go to modify. And I'm going to say add attribute. So I need to create my own attributes so that I could then make sliders basically for the fingers. I want to separate the basic ones from the rest of them, so I'm going to put a couple underscores. Just hit add. Now I have this one. It's just a separator just so it's easy to see what's mine and what's the original stuff. And then I'm going to add in each one of these things. So I'm going to say pinky bend. This is going to be a float, meaning it could be any number, negative or positive decimal point. Some items may be vector. So if I had exact position data, it's 3 digits, that's a vector. If I had a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that would be an integer. If I had a on, off, true, false, that would be booleans. And then if I had other things, it would be one of these other ones, okay? So for all of ours, float is what we're going to use. So you don't have to worry about changing it. Just know that that's what we're going to use. There's a minimum and maximum. Remember we talked about that before when we were doing the Game of Thrones one where you could slide the thing forever and we didn't know where it ended? Well, we don't want that. We want to have a minimum and a maximum. The finger, I can't do it very good because I don't have robot fingers, but it should be able to bend up some and then obviously be able to bend in, okay? So he may need to bend up his fingers some. So we're going to go -10 to +10. Defaults will always be 0. I hit OK or add. Now I'm going to say middle bend. Spell this right. -10, 10. And then I will say index bend. Anyone notice anything about how I'm typing the names? Capital on bend. Okay. This is called camel casing. The first word is always lowercase, then every word after that is uppercase. Okay, so bend is a capital B. If I had Declaration of Independence, it would be the is lowercase, declaration would be capital, of would be capital, independence would be capital. And what happens is when I add this, watch over here, it automatically knows that these are 2 separate words. And so it knows index is one word and bend is another word. Okay? So again, staying consistent with how I'm naming things, that's how I name my stuff. Okay, and Maya's happier for it. The thumb is a little bit different. So the thumb, we have a couple controls. One of them is going to be this like rotating one, so the thumb could like spin around. And then the other one will be more of just that bending. So I have 2 controls. One is going to be a thumb twist. This is not going to have a minimum. I'll come back and set that because I don't know how far I want this to be able to twist. And then the other one will be a thumb bend. I don't know how far I want this one to go yet either, so I'll just leave that. And then I have a thumb end bend. And this one will have a minimum and maximum. Okay. So basically this thumb joint will be able to rotate this way around here like this. It'll also be able to rotate like this. And then this joint will have another one that'll rotate just like that. And it is moving slightly. I'll have to check that out and see, why are you moving slightly? Oh, he's not pivoting in the right spot. Uh-oh. Let's grab our geometry. Let's unparent the stuff. Let's make sure that our joint is in the exact spot we need it. Nope. So I'm going to snap it this way and snap it that way. There we go. And then I will reparent my stuff to the joint. Come on, grab the joint. There we go. Whew. Close one. All right, so that's that one. So we'll do the fingers first. I'm only going to do one finger. If you want to see how to do the second finger, rewind the video and then just imagine that I did the second finger, okay? This is going to be done using set driven. So instead of us creating a one-to-one relationship, we're going to be creating a -10 to whatever and a +10 to whatever relationship, okay? And that's the benefit of using set driven, is that you can set it up for whatever you want. I could have -10, move the thing this far, and +10, move it a mile, okay? So I'm going to grab the pinky, which is on this side. And again, I'm going to turn off my geometry so I don't accidentally select that. This, shift click, shift click. I'm going to grab the rotate and verify the direction. So this is rotating in Z. And then I'm going to say set driven key. So if I've named everything correctly, I should see a consistent naming. Left pinky 1, left pinky 2, left pinky 3. If something is out of whack, one of those names is going to be off. So double check, triple check, make sure everything is the same thing you want. The hand is going to be my driving object. Okay, so the hand or the controlled object will always be on top. What gets controlled will always be on the bottom. Okay, so this is pinky bend. It's going to control all of these 3 joints, rotate Z. Okay, that's how it's going to work. Right now, if I were to click on my left hand, go to pinky bend, it's at 0. All of the joints for this are at 0. It's perfectly flat. So like that's a starting point, so I'm going to say key. Then I'm going to set pinky bend to -10. And then I'm going to rotate these joints to tell Maya what I want pinky bend to look like when it's at -10. So I'm just going to grab the joints. 5, there we go. This one can come up actually somewhat far. And then this one I can scoot back this far, and then this one I can scoot back that far. It's always better to go further than you think you would need. That way you can always get back to where you are. Okay, it's a robot. It's not breaking his finger. All right, so I'm going to hit key again. That's where I want it to be at -10. So now I'm going to test it. I'm going to grab the fingers. I'm going to go to pinky bend. You can do it here. I just like to click the word and then middle click and drag. So I'm going to middle click and drag, and you'll see it bends. So 0 looks like this, -10 looks like that. I'm going to go to +10 and tell Maya what I want it to look like on +10. Grab it and rotate. I'm making sure I only rotate in the one Z direction. Perfect. And key. So there's -10, there's +10. If something didn't work, usually what happens, and not just for newbies, but anyone, you forget to load in the next set. So when I go in to do the middle finger, I have to go in here and grab the middle finger joints, say load driven, make sure I click the middle finger, make sure I click this, make sure I click that, set my key, and then go from here. This goes to -10. That gets rotated up. This goes to +10. that gets rotated down. And then if I verify, okay, and so now two of these work. Oops, two of these work. If I screwed up, let's say I adjust middle bend and index fingers moving or something, okay? If I just go to those joints, grab the attribute, right click and say break, then it'll just break the connection. I can do it over again, okay? Especially as a beginner, don't be afraid to redo these 20 times if you need to. The more you do it, the easier it's going to be. Now this one is a bit trickier, okay? So with this one, I could, just right now kind of decide, do I want to be able to do this with an attribute? Let's say I rotated it like this. That's the X direction. Then I rotate it in Z. Look at what's happening to all these numbers. They're all going crazy. So there's not a direct way for us to just say, make that work. I have to adjust some settings first. So I'm going to hit Control A. And I'm going to change the rotate order. So Maya has a specific order, and all 3D softwares have a specific order that calculates the rotate X, Y, and Z. If you're bored on a Saturday night, you can look up this thing called Gimbal Lock. Not Gimbal Lock, there we go. And it's basically a way for 3D software, if you aren't aware of this, it'll just kind of go crazy. Like you're rotating something and just kind of like wonk out, right? So you can look that up if you want. So I have to change the rotate order so that we're rotating in the X direction and the Z direction first. So right now it's X, then Y, then Z are getting calculated. So I can try this one. Let's see. So I rotate this, the X direction works. And this one, the Z direction works. All right, so that one seems to be good. So that's perfect. I can go here, and then I can go there. And either of those seem to work. Even though Y is first, for whatever reason, it just wants to work like that. Okay. I think I can also go to ZXY. So if I go like this and go like that, that also works. Okay. So either one of those seems to be fine. I can adjust it later if I need to. So now I'm going to go into this and see what's going to control what. So this is my X direction here. Yes. And then this is my Z direction there. So X and Z. So I'm going to use, for this one, because it's kind of a special case, I'm going to use an expression. So LT underscore thumb1 dot rotate X is going to equal LT underscore hand dot, what do I call that one? Thumb twist. Okay, even though this is capital space capital, that's not how I originally typed it. That's how Maya is displaying it, but I typed it lowercase than uppercase. I'll hit create. I will check it out and see if it worked. Thumb twist. And that seems to be working pretty good. Cool. Now let's try the next one. Oops, let's go back to our expression. I think it was rotate Z was the next one, so let me copy that. And this will be rotate Z is going to be equal to thumb bend. So here's thumb twist, yes. Here's thumb bend, yes. Thumb twist, thumb bend. Okay. Now we're entering the realm of what we had inside of that Game of Thrones one, where in order for me to do anything major, I have to really kind of scroll this thing really far. So what could I do to this to make it more drastic every time I update the values? Multiply it, right? So if I take this thumb twist and I multiply it times 10, take this one, multiply it times, let's say, 2 or 3, or 2.5, just to cut the difference, and say edit. Let me go back to this, go back to thumb twist. Much better. And same thing with bend. Much better. Cool. Now the other thing I don't want expressions outside of other expressions. I want everything just like right there. So I'm going to hit Control X. I'm going to delete the expressions, go into my other one, and just paste it in here and say edit. If it helps, you can do 2 forward slashes and say foot or leg controllers.
Just organize everything.
Yeah, you don't have to do this, but it just helps. And then this is what? Thumb. And if I use the right forward slashes, I shouldn't get any errors, and I did. Good. Okay. And then for this one, all I would do is just do a set driven on this one with the other parts of this. So I could just load in the left thumb here. This is going to be thumb end bend. Rotate Z. So I'll set a key on this. Set it to -10. Rotate it up. And I'm kind of looking at where this could rotate to. You can see where that end stops. So it's just short of that. Key it. And then going the other way, just until it's about there, and key that. Okay, now I could have written an expression for that, but the rotating back only goes so far, and the rotating forward goes a bit further. So I would have to kind of limit myself as to how far back and forward it goes. Okay. Now I said before we could adjust this afterwards, like that value. Maybe we don't need it to rotate around so many times. Maybe we do. Maybe at some point I want my robot to be able to spin his thumb around a whole lot. Maybe it's a key, right? It spins around, it turns into something else, and then he could unlock doors. I don't know. Right, a drill, anything. So if I needed to edit it, I can go to Modify Edit. Go to my thumb twist. There it is. Yep. And then say has minimum, has maximum. So let's say my minimum is -20, my positive is +20. Okay, so now I've just limited myself, so we can't go any further than those 2 values, right? Like I said, for that it doesn't necessarily need to be, but we can definitely have it. All right, so the other fingers, same thing. The other thumb on the other hand, the other fingers on that hand, it's the same thing. Whatever you do on one side of the body, it's going to be the same thing you do on the other side of the body. That's why I love expressions, because if I named everything exactly the same, just RT and LT are swapped, I can copy that expression and just rename LT and RT. It's set driven, there's no easy way. Just do it again. That's the only way we have to do it. Cool. So this little guy, apart from that, is pretty rigged. This thing needs to be controlling something. Right now it's not controlling anything. So where else have we seen this kind of controller before? Where we have a ball joint? Wrist. The shoulder one's controlled using that IK. Okay. So the wrist one, what do we use for that? Orient constrain, okay? So we always grab the item that's being constrained last. So the neck is going to be constrained, so we go to that. We make sure maintain is on. We hit add. I grab this. I rotate. Double check it. Everything's cool. Awesome. Okay? So that should get you through being able to rig this guy. It's a lot of repetition. It's a lot of kind of decision making. How do I want to rig this? How do I want to set this up? Based on how your bones go in, your rig may be slightly different. You may be able to use the connection editor for a lot of stuff. You may decide you want to just do expressions on all of it. That's up to you how you want to do it. Once you're done rigging him, you're going to put together an animation showing all of the controls. So every single one of those controls that we created in here, you'll show this guy moving around. So if I made a control for the hip, which I did, I will show this coming up, and then this going back. And then I will show this going up, and then this going back. And then I will show back down. This thing moving over here, moving over there. I'll come over to the hand. I'll show each one of these things. I'll show the thumb twisting, the thumb bending, the thumb end bending. I'll show the wrist rotating. I'll show the hand moving around. Okay. Notice that there's a limit also, so I can't go obviously past where he physically could go. I should also be aware that even though I can do this, that wouldn't look natural, right? Going inside the body. Right, unless you're a T1000. Same thing with the head. Okay. He's already textured, so it should just be a matter of adding some lights to your scene. What did I just create? An area light? There we go. Taking the intensity of the light up, holy cow. And then rendering out your animation of that.